Now, I haven't done this in a while. Like I said, I'm going to do this pretty quickly. Are you ready? Okay. All right. Now, one sentence has the preamble, 7 articles, and then let's start with the one. Let's go with RAPS. Freedom of religion, assembly, press, petition, speech. Freedom of religion, assembly, press, petition, speech. Again, it's one thing to memorize the First Amendment. It's another thing to kind of understand what that means. It means that you have the freedom to exercise whatever religious philosophy you choose, that it is not to be discriminated against. That seems easy. Assembly, you have the right to assemble without being interrupted. Unless it's violent, you don't want that. Press, you should be able to write things, especially if they're critical of those in power, without retribution. Petition, to get others to agree with you, to get other people to align with you, and then speech. But I think be careful with freedom of speech, because some people just means it gives me the right to cuss or say untruthful things about somebody. That's not necessarily protected. It was not intended to be protected in the Constitution. What was protected is to be able to say, I think King George is a buffoon, and not face the death penalty for criticizing those in power. Okay, RAPS. So that's it. That's for number 1. 2, a lot of people know 2, freedom to bear arms. 3, looks like about the shape of a quarter. 3rd is no quartering act. That means that police, those in power, can't come in and sleep in your house. They used to be able to do that, to say, I'm going to come in and kind of camp out here. It was the British. We're going to kind of take over your house for a little bit. You can't be quartered. 3 and 4, no search and seizure. Not only can you not come in and sleep in my house, if you're an authority figure, you can't search my house because it's my property. 5, just put up the hand. Means you do not have to say anything to incriminate yourself. I feel like this could come in so handy in school. Here's a little tangent. I feel like sometimes teachers will say, like, why aren't you doing your homework? Why aren't you doing this? And then a student will answer, and no matter how they answer, they're getting set up. Why aren't you doing your homework? It doesn't matter what you say, you're going to get shushed. So sometimes best not to say anything at all. Now, of course, that meant legal things, but anyway, I'm just relating it. 6, I think about this one is quick. So you got 5. Quick is you want a speedy trial. 7, you hope that you have lucky number of people on your jury that's going to support you. 8 is no cruel or unusual punishments. Even if you wanted cruel and unusual punishments, that's not allowed. If you wanted to be dunked in icy cold water or tortured or tarred and feathered, that is considered cruel and unusual punishment. Maybe sitting in a confined room for 8 hours a day might be considered that. 9 is mine. That means if you look at all these other amendments, they're really for criminals. To carry a gun, trial by jury, you can't search and seize my property, seize my property. And so all of these are 8, up to 8, are like essentially for people in that system. And 9, they just said, look, you don't have to be involved in this. You still should have fundamental rights. I don't remember the exact wording, but I'll go back and look. So I just call 9 as mine. And then if 9 is mine, 10 is for your state. You have rights as an individual, and your state has rights. 9 is mine, 10 is for your state. And if you could remember 10 is for your state, 11, that means one state cannot sue another state. States have power. If you're a criminal in one state and you run to another state, you aren't protected by that state's maybe differing laws. So states cannot sue each other. That's 11. 12 I call the number 1 and number 2. Up to the 12th Amendment, whoever got the most votes became president. Second most votes became vice president. There's the dispute and a quarrel. So the 12th Amendment came around, I think, 1804, where you would elect the president and vice president on the same ticket, even though they're separate. 13, 14, 15 all go with the Civil War. Slavery isn't allowed. 14 was a long amendment up for interpretation, very confusing. But 14th, the intent of the 14th Amendment was how to bring the Union back together after the Civil War. There were still huge blocks for people who were former slaves. And so they had to write the 15th Amendment to say, look, slavery is still non-constitutional. To own a human being, to have somebody else work for you for their profit, is unconstitutional. Okay. 16, a way to remember 16 is, at least in most states in the U.S., you have to be 16 before you can get a driver's license and a job. It's just a way for me to remember that 16 means if you have a job, then you have to pay income taxes. 17, senators needed to be elected instead of like a buddy system or family. Like when you have a position of power, you want to bring in your best friends and maybe your family. But the 17th Amendment said, no, it's not, what is that, nepotism? We need to get rid of that. You can't just have your best friends because we don't know if they're qualified for the job, so they need to be elected. 18 was prohibition. Prohibition, in many ways, was started because women, especially in the Western states, who had the negative recipient end of abuse due to alcohol consumption, really were the spearhead into the prohibition movement. So they wanted a constitutional amendment saying alcohol is not allowed because it's that bad. 19th were the women's right to vote. There's no coincidence that those two are next to each other because it was women, a group of women who wanted to stop alcohol from being distributed to harm the general welfare. The 19th Amendment women. 20 is the lame duck. 20, here's my imitation of a duck. Ready? Okay, lame. Lame duck is if the president becomes incapacitated, unable to hold the presidency, then the vice president automatically needs to take over. And actually, it shortened the presidency. I think the president used to take office in March. That's been a while. Anyway, and now it's January 20th when the president is inaugurated, because there was such a long time, like after the Civil War, when there was a president who was in power and all of this chaos was happening, but nobody was really leading because the president was like, hey, I'm out of here in a few months. So they said, you become a lame duck, meaning, you're not able to, you're not going to do the best service for the country if you already think you're out. So they just shortened it. So lame duck amendment is what it's called. 21 repealed the 18th Amendment. 21 brought back in alcohol, saying we need the alcohol, I guess. It just meant that it wasn't illegal throughout the country anymore. Okay, 22nd Amendment. 22, the president can serve two term limits of 4 years for a total of 10. The 22nd Amendment says the president can hold no more than 2 terms of 4 years for a total of 10. The math doesn't add up because what it's saying is you can be, let's say, vice president and become president and still hold 2 more presidential terms. So it just limited the presidential powers. Like Roosevelt had, I think, 4 terms of his presidency, and they just wanted to limit that. So that's the 22nd Amendment. 22, 4 years, no more than 10. 23 D.C. just makes it rhyme. That's how I remembered it. 23 meant the District of Columbia, even though it's not a state, got to have electors for the Electoral College. So Washington, D.C. could have participation in who becomes president. 2464 poll, meaning the 24th Amendment passed in 1964, eliminated the poll tax. Because for a while, the sneaky little interpreters said, well, you have to pay money to vote. Well, of course, that hurt poor people, which wasn't in the greater good. It wasn't in the general welfare. So 24 allowed anybody to vote no matter your financial status. 25, still alive, meaning, did I get that right? Oh, I might have confused that. 20 is the lame duck, meaning the president became president in office on January 20th. 25th meant if the president becomes incapacitated, the vice president takes over. Sorry, I might have confused that. 26 meant 18-year-olds had the right to vote. That was because of the Vietnam War, and students said, look, I'm 18, and you're going to consider me an adult, and I'm going to go fight in a war, but I can't drink. And I can carry a gun and fight. So the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. Because 18-year-olds said, if we're considered adult and you can send us off to war and be drafted, we should have the right to vote on that. So it just lowered the voting age. Then 27 just said Congress can't raise their own salaries.